Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part 3 of my conversation with Howard Wach, who recently retired as Provost at Guttman Community College. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
You were about to hear part 3 of our conversation with Howard Wach from Guttman Community College. This is the final episode of Season 2 of Digication Scholars Conversations. We hope you have enjoyed it. We will be taking a break this summer and will return in the fall with a brand new season. As always, we appreciate your support. Thanks for listening.
You asked about, you said you want to kind of turn the conversation towards community colleges, and that's sort of it's where I spent a good chunk of my career, most of my career, and I've witnessed and been part of how that evolution has proceeded over the last generation, and there what we see is a very, very clear direction which has underscored and poured resources into an understanding of the community college, which is very, very heavily vocational, which looks at career preparation as the absolute essential that a community college must provide. And so I found myself over the last few years, as I sort of filter different opportunities, grant opportunities from private sector or from public sources, most of what was coming in our direction was to increase the number of internships, to increase the number of degrees that are offered that go directly to the workplace. And so that has been a major direction, a major kind of initiative that community colleges have been following for the last number of years, really the last decade very powerfully, but before that as well. What's interesting is that particularly in CUNY, and that orientation for community colleges is not a new thing at all. And in many parts of the country, that is the fundamental role of community colleges. And they are often very closely tied to local industry, to local employers. And so students come there for that, whatever that skill is that will lead directly into a job at that local employer. That's what they're doing at the community colleges. CUNY, where I spent my community college career, is quite different. Because the origins of community colleges in CUNY are really as, what used to be called junior colleges. They were the place to go to get your first 60 credits so that you could then go get the last 60 credits and get a bachelor's degree. When I got to Bronx Community in the late 90s, the whole curriculum and the way that the college was structured was mostly for that. And in the CUNY system, most students who come to the community colleges, when they're asked, what is your goal? They're not going to say a 2-year degree. They're going to say a bachelor's degree.
Right.
They're also going to say,
after or whatever.
Right. They go to Lehman College or to Baruch College or to City College or to Hunter College. And that was always kind of the traditional CUNY model for community colleges. There were always career-oriented programs. I mean, the Bronx used to have an enormous nursing program. Still has an important nursing program, although it's not as big as it once was. And all of them have those 2-year terminal degrees, the AAS degree. But the overall direction, including the politics of all of this, has been to push to have community colleges move more and more in that direction. And we feel it in CUNY because that was not the original purpose of the community college, although now to a much greater extent it's moving in that direction. And that's not a bad thing at all. I mean, I think that's really important. On the other hand, I'm a historian by training. I have a personal feeling about what the value of humanities education is, and it's something that I always wanted to try to strengthen. It was a great frustration to me that I wasn't able
Mhm.
to do it as well as I could have,
Right.
as I might have under
Because
other
it would have been
circumstances.
difficult for you to have steered, that ship, given the trends of trying to get
Yeah,
students prepared for an immediate job to get them into study history or in a
right, right,
more
right.
liberal arts like environment. No, isn't
Yeah,
it interesting though that, at the same time, I feel like this is where you can, it's all about deciphering all the sources and where things come from. Because I also hear so much about employers at very many different, studies and surveys and whatnot that talks about, yeah, but what I really want is a critical thinker and a problem solver and basically the kind of things that comes more from a liberal arts, education than the one that just follow sort of content specific, procedural instructions.
skills,
I don't want to.
skills
Yeah, I don't want
specific
to.
instruction. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't want to like diminish what that is, but like sort of the liberal arts sort of promise, which is more of the we want you to figure out how to think for yourself and digest things and put things together, right, and to ask questions, and
yeah. What tends to
yeah.
happen is that I mean, everybody. I think most folks at least recognize exactly what you're saying. That all of the employer feedback always says exactly what you just described.
Mhm,
What we're not looking for that specific skill. What we're looking for, we can help. We can teach that. We
mhm,
can
right.
we can now that which is true up to a point. I certainly
Mhm.
don't want to go to a hospital where a nurse
A
is
nurse
learning
doesn't know
on the
how to,
job.
right, right,
That's
sure,
not. I don't want that, and I don't think any
right,
of us
right,
do.
right.
But there is this feeling among employers that those so-called soft skills,
Hmm.
not one of my favorite phrases, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yep.
That the critical thinking skill, the problem solving skill, the team building skill, the teamwork skills, that these are the things that really matter to
Yep.
employers, because those are those are the qualities that make for a good employee, along with the specific skills that are needed for the job. What has tended to happen, and at least in my experience, is that the recognition of that is there, and it gets channeled into what's called general education.
Right.
So every college has their general education goals, and they carefully write them out, and there are endless meetings and discussions and drafts about what they ought to say and wordsmithing about what they ought to say. Um,
Right.
and then the teaching of it is rooted to the freshman comp class, the intro sociology class, the intro history class, and that's it. Um, and you get your 24 credits or whatever it
Mhm.
is, and you're done. Um, it's not as rich.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same kind of impact it does if it's really extended further. And I think in some cases it is extended further.
Yeah.
But it's there's no question in my mind that that humanities component to an undergraduate education is really a stepchild in the community
Yeah.
colleges.
I think
Um,
it's really interesting because even I know what you were saying that in certain parts of the country, um, the community colleges students are expected to. I mean, that is the terminal degree in that you learn the skills and you can go straight into the workforce, and
mhm.
there's no more no more degrees necessary for you to be fully qualified for something. And but in CUNY, like you said, historically it's more of a sort of a junior college in preparation for a full 4 year bachelor degree and further. Um, but I think it's interesting to try to sort these out, right? Because at the same time, if we are to look at the 4 year degree programs, and they are to put all of these really important skills, this employability, sort of zingers into, like, stuff it into the gen ed courses that are all sort of crammed into sort of first couple years. Isn't that basically kind of the same space where if you were to attend a community college and then attend a 4-year college, isn't that the time and space where you would do that too?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, I think,
Right.
look, I mean, CUNY went through this earthquake about 10, 12 years ago called Pathways,
Mm,
which was this big
mhm,
overhaul of the curriculum
mhm,
system wide. It resulted in lawsuits. It resulted in union actions. It was a mess, and but eventually it got done. And it set up a structure where the general education curriculum actually does extend through the 4 years,
mhm,
and the community colleges have one role. The senior colleges, as transfer recipients, have another role, and they have a third role, which is really the one that they think about the most, which is with their own freshmen,
mhm.
going from year one through
Right,
year
right.
four
Mhm,
at Hunter College or Baruch
right.
College.
Mhm,
So there's a recognition that these things are important to cultivate over 4 years. Um, I wish it were stronger,
yeah.
and I wish that uh, that side of an undergraduate education got more attention than it does at present,
Yeah.
with the kind of focus on skills development, on workplace skills,
Mhm,
and training that that is really where the the sector is right now.
mhm,
Again, I don't want to overstate this because those things are really important and they have enormous value. If we can provide a high quality internship to a
mhm.
student
Yep.
in connection with the degree program that they're pursuing, that's just an amazingly valuable experience,
Sure, sure.
and really really important.
Mhm. So let me switch gear just a little bit, because I wanted to take advantage of your experience at three colleges where, no, I don't think I know the demographic in Guttman quite as much, but both Bronx and LaGuardia are hugely, hugely diverse campuses. Your students, speak over 100 different languages. I think LaGuardia was something like more like close to like 150 or something like that. From as many different regions and locations and countries in the world. Um, the of course, a lot of schools in other parts of the country struggle with having a diverse student population, um, both in ethnicity, in origin of where they were born, the language they spoke, culture, and all of that, but also in economic background, not economic background, but also just like really almost every facet of life. And you being in a system, being in New York, really take advantage of this sort of like explosion of people from all over the place. So in some sense, I mean, that's one of the most beautiful thing that when I have visited, various CUNY campus, I've visited many CUNY campuses, and I don't remember coming to LaGuardia, and um, I think there was a few times where we had, there were some events, and I think, I was just, in the like there was a central atrium area when the students are like eating and
Hmm.
breaking during lunch and stuff. Oh man, it's amazing. it's
Yeah.
it's really like it's like it feels like you're in the epicenter of the world, like
Yep.
everything is converging into one place. It's beautiful. Can we talk a little bit about that and what you get out of that?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, the three different campuses that I worked at had slightly different each of them had slightly different configurations of diversity, of ethnic or racial diversity. Um, the Bronx is majority Latino, Latinx, and the as a borough, that's the population there, and
Hmm.
that's also the population at Bronx Community College. I don't know. The last time I looked, it might have been 65% or so Latino,
Hmm.
um, and with maybe 30% of the students being black, both African American and Caribbean, um, and African actually, which was a definitely a growing population in the borough and in the college.
Hmm.
Often really, really outstanding students from Africa.
Hmm.
LaGuardia was a little different because Queens is a little different. The community colleges draw from a kind of a catchment area, which is generally the borough that it's located in. Guttman is different because it's in the middle of Manhattan, but
Right.
Queens is unbelievably diverse. There are people from really all over the world, and that was reflected in the demographics of the college. Guttman was a little closer to the Bronx model. In fact, slightly more than a third of the students at Guttman are Bronx residents. So that was actually the largest contingent from the different boroughs of the city.
Hmm.
But Guttman was roughly 85% or so Black and Latino, with, again, the Latino population being larger than the Black population. So, there were slightly different mixes in each of the colleges, but they were what they all had in common is that they were people of color, largely, overwhelmingly, and and bringing this kind of fierce ambition with them. Sometimes the ambition outstripped the preparation, and that was something that we always kind of had to contend with. But I have just tremendously fond memories of being in the classroom at Bronx, is where I was mostly in the classroom,
Hmm.
and of the students there who were just wonderful, and to try to kind of tap that ambition and tap that curiosity is was one of the joys of working, and it made me want to go to work in the morning.
Yeah.
um, and over time, over the years, and really in the last part of my career, and it was largely at the time at Guttman, where that got a little more complicated for me. And what I began to perceive is the damage of good intentions. Sometimes is how I would put it,
Mm.
which was something I struggled with at Guttman particularly, although it was present at all of these colleges. I was more conscious of it, I think, towards the end of my career, and and I was also in a position as
Mm.
provost where
Right.
I had a sort of I had a larger voice,
Yeah.
um, and I tried to use it for that purpose. And what I mean is that uh, we're talking about faculty and staff, but primarily faculty, who are majority of them are white. They have very progressive politics for the most part,
Hmm.
not entirely, but for the most part,
Hmm.
and and sometimes those convictions translate into expectations for students that are
Mm.
that are not as high as they should be. They're not as demanding as they should be, and that leads to unintended consequences, which are damaging to students.
Mm.
It's a very, very difficult problem to solve, a difficult problem to sort of get your hands around and then try to do something about, because it touches on people's deepest emotions.
Yeah.
No one wants to be called a racist. Uh, I think. um, and no one wants to be told or have it suggested that their intentions are having these unintended consequences. That their convictions are having these, and the way that they practice their convictions are having unintended consequences. Um, but I think that's something that, I mean, it's definitely something I became much more aware of over the last couple of years. It's closely connected to everything that has happened
Hmm.
since 2020. The reckoning that we've all had to contend with after George Floyd was murdered, and after the response to that, the reaction to that, that was so powerful and so important for the future health of the society we live in. So these are, these were very serious and troubling and difficult things to work through. And it was difficult. It was hard, but it's the reality,
Yeah.
and and it's a reality that is sometimes difficult for some people to accept. Um, I learned an awful lot from Black colleagues, particularly at Gutman, who helped me understand some of this a little bit better than I ever had, and and helped guide me in some of the things that I did and said in response to it. Um, but this is very uh, these touch on very deep vulnerabilities in people, and so they're really challenging to work through.
Hmm. What do you think about um, what do you think about uh, schools who that are, it's interesting because you have such a diverse student body comparing to many schools where there that's sort of they're and then so you get to see all these problems, and you get to observe these things as they unfold. Hey, this program, this faculty member, maybe even this curriculum has certain assumptions that we make that
Mhm.
have had unintentional but essentially systemic racism built in, and you wouldn't know until it happened, and then you see the student body react or don't react to something, and you go, oh wow, I just learned from this. And then
Mhm.
you start to have that reflective moment, either by yourself or with your colleagues, where you can say, hey, would someone be impacted by this? Would you have been impacted by this if you were a student? And you get to sort of understand that and try to study that. But I see most schools. I mean, you have that in a way that's like a privilege, a place for you to be able to do that. Because
Mhm.
in many colleges that I see, they try as they might. Um, the diversity of the student body itself isn't there to allow them to even have those observations,
Yeah.
and so things
Mhm.
become a lot more theoretical. And I remember talking to um, another CUNY professor who was on Digication Scholars Conversations in season one. His name is Michael Yarbrough, and he's from John Jay. I love the people in John Jay. I think they really are like a real college of criminal justice, but also justice in general. But I remember him saying to me that, "Hey, look, I didn't, I didn't think I was going to be a professor. I liked the research part of this, and he had, he had, he had a pretty um, underprivileged childhood himself, but he said that when he came into the classroom in John Jay, the first things that I think that he was talking about, laws in society or something like that, And he said, when I talked about these particular laws in our society today, it's not a hypothetical. A student would go, that happened to my cousin last week,
Yep.
right? This thing that was unfair, or this thing that was ridiculous. Why is this bill, here? Why is it targeting this? Yeah, it happened to my cousin. He's in jail right now. And and that's amazing. That's amazing to have that. And he said to me that lights him up, right?
Mhm.
And I could imagine that's what lights you up too, when you said, hey, when I want to go to work with these students because they are a
Yeah.
source of inspiration to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's what it's like. That's the reason. I would occasionally get asked. People would ask me, "So, do you miss teaching? Do you miss being in the classroom?" And the answer was yes, I did. I mean, there were aspects of teaching that I didn't miss grading papers, to be
Mhm,
perfectly honest.
mhm,
Um, but I absolutely did miss being in the classroom and having the opportunity to engage in dialogue with students and give and take with students. And part of the reason for that was that they were coming with this sort of hunger. They were coming with hunger for knowledge, and uh, their integration of that knowledge into who they are was was conditioned by the world that they were coming from, and the world that they were
mhm,
coming from is largely poor, and it's largely racially minoritized, and that is a particular perspective. It's not mine because I'm a white man who I didn't grow up with enormous privilege, but I never went hungry, and uh, and uh, and I never, I never was tailed in a store, and I was never pulled over by the cops for no reason. So these are experiences that I never had, but that these students
mhm,
frequently do have and have had,
mhm.
and it colors how you talk about things like constitutional law. Or about Brown versus Board of Education, or about Plessy versus Ferguson, um, or about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X.
Mm,
So there are that's part of the of the advantage of being in an environment like the one that CUNY provides, the one that CUNY is. It's not that it
yeah.
provides; that's what it is.
Mhm.
That's what it's
It's
always
kind of
been.
an amazing sort of microcosm of New York, and
Hmm.
this, sort of a place of immigrants, and a place of, sort of a center of all these things combined. And it is very beautiful in that regard. I do want to sort of, point out that, you shared a lot of your experiences, at your various institutions, some of the things that were tough, some of the things that were
Hmm.
difficult to do. But I think this is exactly what it looks like when you're in the trenches trying to solve these hard problems, and
Hmm.
that the people are there. And I must say that, um, I can't I can't pretend that every one of your colleagues work the way that you do. Maybe some do. I can't I won't know that, but just knowing that people like you had, been doing this type of work, um, make me feel good and confident about the way that, hopefully, like, even if you don't agree with all of the micro directions as going, the overall direction is, is hopefully going into a positive one.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Jeff. I mean, I'm very, it's funny because in another, if, from another point of view, very personal to me, I feel a lot of gratitude to CUNY. CUNY is a big
Mhm,
bureaucracy. It's kind of a crazy place at times. It's embedded in the city. It's embedded in city politics, local politics, state politics, city politics. Um, but it gave me a really good career. uh, I had an opportunity to do a lot of different things, and in these different institutional spaces that I found myself in. Um, and I feel a lot of gratitude. I feel fortunate to have been able to do that, and to I think made some kind of a difference in the places that I worked. And you know, at a certain point, it was time to stop, and that's what I did last summer. So there you go.
So, so Howard, before I let you go, what's next for you? I know that you retired, but I can't imagine you being fully
Yeah.
like just
Well,
hanging out
it
by a
was
beach.
it was a
Yeah.
little bit more than 6 months ago that I stopped
Mhm,
working.
mhm,
And at first, and it's the first thing I'll say for those of you out there who are thinking about
mhm.
this, um, it's one of those really big life transitions for sure. Um, and that probably seems like it's kind of self-evident, but I didn't appreciate it until I actually went through it. It's a really big transition. I, um, I know I made the right decision for myself, and the first 3 4 months afterwards, it was basically just exhaling. It was kind of relaxing, particularly after the last couple of years, which were really challenging. They've been challenging for everyone, um, and uh, and they were challenging for me. But now I'm thinking about what to do and where I would want to put some of my energy and whatever I know about what I've been doing for the last 35 years. And I come back to what I was saying a little bit earlier about humanities education and about uh, community colleges, and more specifically, really about the discipline that I was trained in and that I worked in for so long as a historian. I would love to be able to contribute to strengthening that side of a community college education somehow.
Mhm.
Um, I think that would give me tremendous pleasure to be able to do that. Um, so that's what I'm gonna look for those opportunities, and do some other things that I've been wanting to do for years and never had the opportunity to do because I had to go to work. So
Um, hey, listen, I think that I'm sure you will enjoy it. I'm sure you will do something pretty impactful. That's kind of that's how, you know, just the pattern recognition here again for the last, 10, whatever, 15 years now that or 14 years that I've known you. Every time I actually speak to you fairly often, especially in the beginning,
mm,
until you got super super busy. But
yeah.
every time I speak to you, you're doing something very impactful, and you're doing something. You navigate the system incredibly well, which is why your career continue to sort of skyrocket every time I saw you. Um, so I have no doubt that you'll be able to put that talent into use, but maybe this time you can do so without having to be so constrained by whether it's a bureaucracy or, I mean, I'm sure it will exist, right? But they don't have that much leverage over you this time, right?
No, no, no. And I'm not, I mean, I'm not eager to go back into, managing personnel, which is the hardest part of any kind of management
Right.
job,
Mm.
or to, have to look at the annual budget and figure out where
Right.
to cut something. I mean, I don't
Right.
want to do that anymore. I
Right.
really don't.
Right. You can do the part that just
Yeah,
makes you excited.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping to be able
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah. Well, I
So,
look forward to seeing you back in some forms. I hope that we continue to engage. I'm sure we
oh, I'm
will.
sure
I'm
we
gonna make
will. I'm
you.
sure we will.
And I hope that you come back to Digication Scholars Conversations too. I If I am correct, so I don't know this for sure, but if I'm correct, Howard, you this will be like the finale. for this season, for season 2.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep, yep.
Okay.
I think. Well, you are
Well,
our. Well, I didn't tell you that because I didn't want to
no,
push
you
it.
didn't. And
Yeah.
it's always, when you're watching one of these
Yeah.
streaming series,
Right.
the finale
This
is
is the
you
finale. Yeah,
when you
a lot of
check the
pressure.
episodes.
Yeah.
Oh, episode 9. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this is
Uh,
it.
th- yeah. This is the finale for this season. We're gonna come back next year, but I'd love to experiment with some. Maybe we'll get you to come back and maybe we'll get colleagues like Jordy, etc., to come back, and we can talk more about these kind of issues, and
Sure.
because I think it's worth these are messages worth hearing.
Mhm.
And I thank you again for sharing your beautiful insights and your beautiful journey. It is inspiring, and every time I speak with you, I learn something that I feel like it takes me usually a while to to digest. I'm not that fast,
Well,
but
that's
it
that's
really
nice.
does benefit me.
That's very modest of you to say. It's not true, but it's
Yeah.
modest of you to say. I think I thank you for asking me to do this. I know you asked me a long time ago, and I put it off, and now we finally got around to it, and it's been fun. And as always, it's a pleasure to kick things around with you. Um, it's always been fun to do that, and uh, you know, look forward to doing it the next time.
Okay. All right.
Thank
Thanks, Howard. Until
thank you,
next
Jeff.
time.
Okay.
Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative e-portfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Jeff Yan and Drew Albanesius. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching.